Hello and welcome to this month's Urban and Community IPM webinar. I am Yulia Velez, a Community Education Specialist with UC IPM. Thank you for joining us today. We are excited to have Sandipa Gautam presenting today on recent updates on Asian Citrus Psyllid in California. Sandipa joined the UC IPM program in 2021, in July 2021 as the Area Citrus IPM advisor and is based at the Lind Cove Research and Extension Center in Exeter, California. Her extension and research program serves citrus growers throughout the San Joaquin Valley, where she develops and evaluates integrated pest management strategies for economically important citrus and arthropod pest. Her work focuses on advancing sustainable pest management through studies on pest biology and ecology, monitoring and sampling methods, insecticide efficacy, resistance management, biological control, and the integration of chemical and non-chemical management tactics. Thank you for joining us, Sandeepa. You may now share your slides and begin.
Thank you, Yuli, for that nice introduction. And good afternoon, everybody. My name is Sandipa, and today I want to begin by thanking the UCIPM urban community for extending invitation to talk to you all about this very important topic to all citrus enthusiasts who signed up today. For the next hour, we're going to talk about the status of Asian Citrus Psyllid and HLB, the disease it transmits in California, and what to know and do for residential citrus. Here is the outline that I'm going to follow. First, we'll talk about Asian Citrus Psyllid and Wanglongbing in general, then a little bit detail about how to identify the pest, how to look for symptoms, and keep touching base on why are they such a big concern. Then we'll move on and talk about the history of ACP and HLB management efforts in California since its introduction in 2008 for ACP and 2012 for HLB, and current status of ACP and HLB, and what's being done by growers. Then we'll focus on best management practices and recommendation for managing ACP and HLB, in non-commercial residential citrus, talking about examples on what to do for different types of scenarios, and then a brief update on findings from ongoing research and what's currently being done. And we'll end today's presentation with Q&A section. So let's get started. A little bit of the background. You probably all are aware, California is recognized worldwide for citrus production. We lead the United States in fresh citrus production. Annual production is about 4.2 million tons. Fresh citrus contributing more than 3 billion in farm gate value annually. But California citrus isn't just found in commercial orchards. It's also a big part of neighborhoods across the state. Millions of homeowners grow lemon, orange, mandarin, limes, other citrus trees in their backyards and front yards for fresh fruit, for shade, for enjoyment, just because we love citrus. And while the exact number of the trees in, residential and areas and landscapes is unknown, it's estimated that there is nearly 8 million, if not more, trees in residential areas. Now, these backyard trees, front yard trees are not just personal investment. They are an important part, a very, cherished part of the overall California landscape. But because insects and diseases move freely between residential and commercial citrus, the health of the backyard trees, what you have in your backyard and front yard, can directly influence the nearby orchards and vice versa. One of the greatest threats that we're talking today is Asian Citrus Psyllid and the devastating disease it can transmit, known as Wanglongbing, also known as citrus greening. And because ACP doesn't distinguish between a backyard tree in a residential property or a commercial orchards, homeowners do play a critical role in protecting our citrus. Today, we're going to talk about the practices that we can do as homeowners to protect our trees and also, help growers in doing so. And recommendations and knowledge that you can share as a master gardener working with homeowners. Let's get started. Asian Citrus Psyllid, or ACP, is a tiny sap-sucking insect, not very bigger than an aphid. It takes up the bacterium while feeding, and as a vector, it will transmit bacterium to a new flush whenever it's landing on a flush and feeding by injecting its saliva. And the bacteria gets into the plant and travels to vascular system, which is nutrient highway for the plant, goes to the roots, affect the roots, and eventually, the disease symptoms start showing. It does take quite some time for the disease to develop, which is why it is such a concerning issue for us. About psyllid, one of the most important points that I want to communicate to you is Asian citrus psyllid, its feeding depends on new growth, or what we call flush. The photo that you can see, on the left. Adult only will lay eggs on the new flush. The photo that you can see in the middle, tucked between the growing flush, those eggs hatch in a few days, and nymphs can only survive by feeding on the young tender leaves and stems, what we call the new flush. These nymphs, as they feed on the plant sap, produce these waxy secretions that are filled with honeydew, which is also one of the identifying characters for Asian citrus psyllid nymphs. So is and they develop by feeding, go through the molds. They have about 5 instars. And when they complete the development, adults emerge and fly away and infest the new plant. So if the tree was infected while feeding, the nymphs are going to acquire the bacterium, and as the adults emerge, they are going to take that bacterium with them, and whichever new site they now feed on, they will infest that new site, and thereby create new infestation. That's how the disease spreads around. Wang Longbing, it has many names. It common, English translation for the word Wang Longbing is yellow soot disease, because over time, as the disease progresses on the tree, the shoots start turning yellow, or citrus greening, because fruits don't change the color. The HLB affected trees produce fruits that do not change color entirely. At maturity, and some of the parts of the fruit, infected fruit, can remain green, which is why the term citrus greening. So the disease is caused by a bacteria known as Candida liberi that lives in saliva of Asian citrus psyllid in the vascular systems of the plants. As I said earlier, when the insect feeds on infected plant sap, it takes up the bacteria, and as it feeds on a new tree that's not been infected, it transmits the bacteria into the plant, and as bacterium multiplies in there and makes it through the tree, it affects the nutrient flow on the tree, causes root decline, and as a result of that, the tree cannot absorb nutrient, and that results into leaves turning into yellow, similar to nutrient deficiency. The tree start losing leaves, the fruit drop happens easily, tree starts producing less fruit, yield is reduced, fruit size is smaller, the fruit color isn't uniform, juice is bitter. The left photo you see is initial infestation, showing some yellow shoots on the tree, probably HLB affected tree. The middle photo showing yellow mottle leaves, similar to nutrient deficiency, but what's different between HLB and nutrient deficiency symptoms is HLB doesn't cause uniform yellowing. As you can see in this picture, one side of the midrib is heavily yellow, whereas other side is relatively green. This is characteristic sign for Wang Longbing disease. And then as the fruit grows, because of the nutrient deficiency and whatnot, fruit is not uniform. It can grow lopsided, bigger on one side and smaller on the other side. And the bottom photo shows that the HLV infected tree, you visually see lack of leaves, the tree pretty much looks see-through, and over time, the tree is going to lose more leaves and eventually causes tree death because this disease does not have cure. Okay, next we move on and talk about identifying the insect, Asian Citrus Psyllid, and the HLB symptoms, and talk a little bit more about why are they a concern. Asian Citrus Psyllid, if is a tiny insect about size of an aphid, but there are distinct characteristics of ACP, which when we learn, helps us identify this insect. The body of the insect is mottled brown gray. The wings are mottled brown and gray, and the body is white. As you can see on the photo over here, there is a brown band that runs through the edge of the wind, and then there is a little bit of discontinuity. This is very common characteristics of Asian Citrus Psyllid. Whenever the insect is resting or feeding, it holds its body at a 45-degree angle. That's another characteristic feature of Asian Citrus Psyllid. None of the other insects do this. But adults do jump quickly or fly short distances when disturbed, and adults can be found resting on mature leaves. Whereas eggs and nymphs, which is what you see on the photo in the middle, ACP eggs tucked, the yellow almond-shaped small size eggs tucked right in between. That's ACP eggs. And then ACP nymphs are only found on tender young flowers. ACP does not lay eggs on mature leaves. The eggs are bright yellow to orange, as you can see in this photo. And nymphs, when they hatch, are tiny, flattened insects with red eyes on the sides. And as they feed, they produce this honeydew waxy bubble, which is another characteristic feature of Asian Citrus Psyllid nymphs. No other insects do that. These bubbles are filled with honeydew, and ants love going after them. And in doing so, ants protect these insects from natural enemies and also transmit, nymphs from one place to another, one tree to another tree. Now, because this is a pest, there are some signs of feeding damage too, even though it's not entirely, characteristic or different. One of the distinct ACP feeding damage is because the ACP nymphs feed on young flush, they make the leaves somewhat twisted or curled, as you can see within these white circles on the photo, on the right bottom photo. And if the infestation is heavy, as you can see on the left photo on the bottom, the leaves can drop. And the leaves don't even, grow to the full size. The leaves look stunted. One of the things I want to communicate here is just as a pest, just as a hemipteran sap-sucking pest, feeding damage alone caused by Asian Citrus Psyllid is minor. We could, if it was just a pest, it would just be another sap-sucking pest among many others, and we would be living with it. It's minor compared with the disease. ACP can spread. Disease is the main concern here. Why? Because Wang Lung Bing disease does not have a cure yet. The psyllid can pick up the bacteria as a nymph or as adult, and it carries the bacteria in its body for the rest of its life, which could be 4 to 6 weeks, and in cooler temperatures, even months. And when that infected psyllid feeds, it takes up the bacteria and passes it on whichever new site it's feeding. The bacteria gets into the tree phloem system, tree's nutrient highway, and then it travels to the roots, then again gets relocated into the plant. And over time, as the disease progresses, as the bacteria develops and takes up the whole tree, the leaves start turning yellow because trees can't take up nutrient and water as efficiently. The characteristic symptom is asymmetrical yellow, like you see in the photo over here on the left side. The yellowing isn't uniform on both sides of the midrib. There is heavy yellowing on one side, whereas other side of the midrib is relatively green. That's characteristic to HLB. And then small misshapen fruit that remain partially green. Again, it affects the quality of the fruit, affects the taste of the fruit, and this is also one of the characteristic HLB symptoms on the fruit. But then by this time, the tree is already, taken over by the disease, and there is no way to save the tree. And we ask how many ways is the disease spreading? Actually, there are only two ways that the disease could spread. Vector, one of the most efficient method that we just talked about in ACP, is the only known vector that transmits this disease. And another way that the disease could, spread is via grafting, which is something I'll talk over in my next slides. So, if you do not already know, nearly all citrus trees are grafted. The reason being the rootstock that's usually grown from the seeds selected for the rootstock is resistant to disease or resistance to different kind of stressors like water stress and whatnot. The rootstock is grown from the seed, and when that rootstock is about a year old, the cyan plant material, which is the variety that has good fruit qualities, what we want, is taken, and then a growing bud is selected and grafted onto the tree. How it's done is the photo on the bottom, as you can see, a cyan, this is a budwood 1 year old. The leaves are removed from the 1 year old twig, and what is left is the photo on the bottom right. You have sticks with growing points. Each of these leaf bases have a growing bud, which will grow into a new branch when grafted onto the rootstock. The photo on the top middle is, using um, a sharp knife. One would cut the budwood and gently put it between make an incision on the rootstock and place it there and tie it, and allow the sign to grow. And over time, the sign will grow. The rootstock is either bent or, like when it bends, it stops growing. And eventually, when that sign is producing enough photosynthesis for the tree, that rootstock is let go, and only the sign is maintained. Now here, what's important is if that either budwood or the rootstock, if it has HLB disease, for example, if the sign is infected with HLB, whatever rootstock you grafted to will now have the HLB, or vice versa. If the rootstock has an HLB, then the sign you grafted to would now have the HLB disease. So this is one way disease can spread. To help with that, there is a program called Citrus Clonal Protection Program run by University of California, Riverside, stationed at Lynn Cove. There is this screen houses where nearly all citrus varieties that are grown in California are maintained. The website to the program is shown here. If you need more information, you can click on that. The sole purpose of this program is to provide disease-free budwood to nurseries. And this program has been ongoing for decades because HLB isn't the only disease that affects citrus. So what the program does is they provide disease-free budwood to nurseries who mix the trees and then sell it to the growers and retail nurseries and to you. In this program, researchers test every tree, and inside this screenhouse, there is pretty much all the citrus varieties that are grown in California every year to make sure that they are completely free of the diseases. They make the budwoods and ship them to nurseries, and in nurseries, they're then grafted into the rootstocks and made into new plants that are then sold to growers or to homeowners. One of the interesting things, CPDPC also takes requests from homeowners to ship budwoods to them. It doesn't cost much. I think one budwood has about six sign birds, and it costs about $8 to $10. I would have to check on that, but it's not very expensive. After Dan Wiley, who is a famous YouTuber doing, showing people how to graft citrus trees, the request for budwood, disease-free budwood had increased significantly. And this is where I would request, all of you who are grafting enthusiasts want to graft their own varieties to get their budwoods from. Okay. Um, we talked about the disease psyllid. What makes it most difficult thing, a dangerous thing, or most devastating citrus disease is it's quick to spread because psyllids, when they feed onto a new plant, they're transmitting the disease. Or budwood, if it's infected, it's just all over the place. It's hard to detect early. The disease doesn't progress um, quickly. It takes somewhere from 9 months up to 2 years for the disease to kind of spread throughout the tree. For sampling efforts to pick the leaf that have the bacterium present, which can then be run through the PCR. Let me walk you through this slide. So when the eggs are laid on new flush next to the psyllid, if this flush is infested, the psyllid picks up the bacterium, and as it molts, it feeds. Now let's imagine it feeds on one or two leaves over here. It's going to take 9 months up to 2 years for the disease to spread to all parts of the tree. So whenever inspectors are out there sampling for leaves that might look like that have disease symptom, or just for screening purposes, which is then run through something called polymerase chain reaction to look for the bacteria. For us to be able to detect bacteria, that leaf that we pulled has to have the bacteria. So there is a lag period between trees infestation and for us to be able to detect the bacteria using PCR, which is what makes this whole system a very complicated system because of the factors that I just talked about. So what are our options? Controlling the vector, using the disease-free plant material are the most effective ways to limit the distribution. And for us who are going to retail nurseries or buying citrus trees from different areas, citrus trees in retail nurseries in the ACP quarantine areas have a tag on them to keep the plants local. And retail nurseries in the HLB quarantine area, within the quarantine area, especially the ones that are not grown inside the greenhouse to avoid to prevent them from ACP, they would need to be destroyed. What that this yellow or blue tag tells you is this is within the ACP quarantine area. Do not move the plant material. This is actually how ACP has been moving around, especially north to Grapevine. I don't exactly know the date. Back probably a decade ago, someone went to San Diego, bought a citrus tree from a local nursery there, and brought it to Placer County and placed it there in their front yard, only to find that the tree was infested with ACP. It was brought up to the authorities, CDFA and county commissioners, and it was figured out later that the tree wasn't supposed to be transported, but then that's how it moves around, and it's very important to know that plant local, buy only trees that have a tag, or even in nurseries, the trees that are treated with ACP effective material and are not don't have the ACP. Okay, now moving on to the next section, history of ACP and HLB management efforts in California and current status of ACP and HLB in the state. Going back a little bit, in the United States, ACP was first found in Florida in 1998, and by 2001 or 2, the disease was already there. By 2001, ACP was also found in Texas. By 2008, it was first detected in California, Georgia, and 2009 um, in Arizona. What this map on the left shows to you is the areas where HLB is currently present, found, detected. As you can see, pretty much Georgia, Florida, Mississippi. What's another state? Missouri. No, that's not Missouri. I don't know what that state is. Texas, some parts of Texas already have the disease, and in California, Southern California, HLV is detected in residential areas. But when we look at where the ACP is present, where is the vector present? Pretty much everywhere. So because the disease is spreading around and vector is already present in these many areas, it's very important that we manage vectors so that the disease spread can be limited. Okay, so this story of California. In March of 2022, HLB was found in a residential tree in Hacienda Heights in Los Angeles. How did it get there? It was most likely already there because the tree that was found positive for HLB had more than 20 grafts on the same tree. So most likely HLB infected tree or infected budwood that was brought illegally into California and planted or grafted onto that tree. And the disease was sat there for a long time. Tree was there, not probably not being affected very much until Psyllid arrived in 2008 and dispersed around the Southern California and picked up the disease and moved it to nearby areas. So, which brings me to another point is same point actually. It's very important to obtain disease-free trees and budwood from reputable nurseries rather than trading plant material from unknown origin. And what do I mean by reputable nurseries? Costco, um, Home Depot, Walmarts, and other areas where, retail nurseries, other retail nurseries where trees are sold. That's reputable nurseries. Um, Avoid buying plants from, corner market, somebody's truck. Or one of the other things we need to kind of practice is not bringing budwood from another state or another country when we travel and like the fruit they have to, kind of like go, oh, I want to graft this on my tree as well. And another thing I think we kind of don't emphasize much is online ordering. I think you can just go and order anything online and it'll be delivered. Of course, there are regulations and everything, but you'd be surprised that things would actually get to you. Um, so it's very important that as homeowners, as someone who loves residential citrus trees, you keep in mind that it's important disease could come in with the budwood or the trees. So that's one area where we could limit that. Here is slide about California's coordinated response to HLB, ACP and HLB. And this is the whole state, citrus industry, CDFA, counties, and everybody. Um, 2008, ACP was first detected in California, and based on what we learned from Florida, because in Florida the ACP was everywhere within all counties. I think within a matter of 3 to 4 years. So early surveillance began using trap cards and everything, and quarantine reasons began. In 2012, first HLB was found. Emergency state quarantine was declared, and within a state, wherever HLB was found, there was interstate quarantine. Another thing that was also done is because most of the citrus juice plants and packing houses are in the San Joaquin Valley, or growers pick and transport it to different areas. If the fruit was moving from one quarantine zone from another, from two other, there were some regulations that needed to be followed. I will talk about the regulations in my next slides. Currently, there are 7 different bulk citrus regional quarantine zones, and this is based on the fact several things. One, if there is geographical barrier separating these regions. Another is where ACP is established. Another, the red region is where ACP and HLB both are present. Blue region is where ACP is present, but the numbers are very low. Pink region is ACP has been found but not established, and green region is ACP is found geographically distinct, but sometimes occasional findings. Um, And since 2019, there is compliance enforcement, strengthened multiple HLB quarantine expansion. You keep seeing probably, if you're subscribing to Citrus HLB expansion, you're probably seeing your, emails blow up. The recent expansion was in San Diego as of May 2026. Which again brings me to the point that stopping vector movement is our strongest tool to slow the disease, because disease is probably moving around. So the California situation, what do we have in California? Because the citrus growing regions in California are climatically different. For example, in the map over here, the coastal region, which has a milder climate, has lemons, different variety. Desert region also has lemons and grapefruit, but it's hot and dry. The San Joaquin Valley, hot summer, cold winters. So different varieties are grown. These areas are geographically separated as well, and most likely because of that, ACP is established in the southern region where temperature is milder, hasn't established in the San Joaquin Valley yet. And based on that, the response of growers is different. In the central and northern California, where more than 75% of the citrus acreage is, the approach is eradication or coordinated treatment. Every time there is a new find on the trap card, CDFA works. If it's a residential find, CDFA goes and makes the treatment. If it's find in the grower area, growers are recommended to make the treatment. Commercial citrus, around 800 meters of any positive find, it could be a dead psyllid on the trap card, is treated. In urban areas, 400 meters are treated. In the southern and coastal California, where ACP is established, growers come together every year and treat during the time when ACP is most active, during 3 week window, early spring and fall. And in urban areas, parasites are religiously released. HLB, any trees that are tested positive to HLB are immediately destroyed, and more trees nearby areas are constantly being tested and monitored. And as new finds, new positive trees are found, they are being removed to date. Since the program, this approach started from 2012, when the first tree was found, 10,429 trees have been destroyed, and these all have been from residential areas. To date, we don't have a HLV infected tree in commercial orchards. Again, a little bit more about what are our growers doing, because they are doing quite a lot. Growers, again, the management approach depends on where the grower, where the orchards are. In desert and Coachella area, the population pressure is low, so growers are treating in winter and probably once in fall. There are some other pests that they're treating with ACP effective materials. In San Diego, the population pressure is mixed. Somewhere it's high, somewhere it's lower. Again, winter pyrethroid applications, August, September, pyrethroid neonicotinoids, broad spectrum insecticides that target psyllids. Ventura County, temperature is mild, favorable for ACP. The population pressure in both Ventura, Riverside, San Bernardino area is high, so they're treating multiple times. And growers are encouraged to do coordinated treatments, and there are pest control districts who are kind of leading this to make application. The recommendations for insecticides, what to use, comes from UC long many years of UC research to use the insecticide with longest residual activity, and usually two applications are made so that any eggs that hatch may not survive. And then Tamarix data is being released by CDFA Biocontrol branch. It's mostly concentrated in urban areas, but it's also being released in grower orchards. And then after doing all of that in the field, growers then before they, pick the fruit, before moving the fruit, they have to treat the field to control any psyllid that could be present, adults especially, that could be present in the orchards, because even though psyllids don't feed on fruit, they could use it they could hitchhike on the fruit. Actually, trapping and everything that was started since 2008 showed that psyllid detections on traps were along the highway corridors, and they were moving along with the fruit, which is where this regulation came in. It was made mandatory since 2017-18 growing seasons that any fruit moving from one bulk citrus quarantine zones to another would have to be fully tarped or transported in an enclosed truck, like you see on the pictures over here. The approach before trucking the fruit is you have to apply the field with a pre-harvest spray, that ACP effective material, or field clean the fruit to remove any branch twigs, and then load the trucks. If you are within the for a grower within the HLB quarantine region, they would have to follow both pre-harvest spray and then bulk citrus load the cover during the transit, and it has to come with the ACP free declaration form. Growers are doing all of this, and in many areas, especially in southern region, coastal region, where there is a lot of urban egg interface, psyllids could sometimes develop in residential areas, be a sink, be a source, and then spill over to urban egg areas. So if you are from an area, coastal region or Southern California, within that very narrow urban egg interface, what you're doing to manage psyllids in your backyard could actually directly affect the growers. Which brings me to best practices and recommendations for managing ACP and HLB in non-commercial and residential citrus. When we, talk about what can we do for managing ACP, HLB in non-commercial areas, in landscapes, in our homes and everywhere, there are actually three different scenarios. Scenario for what to do for an area where ACP is not known to have established, which is north of the Grapevine in the valley from Kern County to Placer County, wherever citrus is grown. Second scenario is ACP is present, which is southern region, most of the southern region, but not inside or near the HLB quarantine. This is mostly true for southern region and coastal region. And third is ACP, HLB, both present, which is quarantine region within the, in Los Angeles area, in Ventura County, in San Diego, wherever HLB has been found. So let's talk about each of these scenarios. So if you are homeowner in the area where ACP is not known to have established, there are a few things you can do. First, again, if you're planting a new tree, buy the citrus from reputable nurseries. If you're planning to graft, on your existing trees, only buy graft disease-free budwood from, CPDPC or a reputable nursery. On established trees, examine citrus trees whenever there is new flush. And in this area, citrus usually flushes twice, once in fall, once in spring. Right about now, some of the varieties are starting to push new flush, but it's usually like mid-July to August is when citrus starts flushing. So whenever there is new flush, that's the best way to, go and evaluate, because like I explained earlier in my presentation, adult psyllids need new flush to lay eggs. They might be present, but they would not lay any eggs on mature leaves. If you do find psyllids, or if you do find an insect that looks like psyllid, um, call the hotline or the local egg commissioner's office, call my office, send us samples. We will confirm that for you. If the psyllid is found near your home, and if it's confirmed when you're contacted by CDFA, support your officers who are coming to make insecticide application, or other treatments to locally eradicate the pest, because that's the goal, is to eradicate wherever it's found. Just make sure that it's taken care of so that it doesn't spread. And okay, I think that's the next slide. So what action does CDFA take to locally eradicate your psyllid? CDFA will, once confirmed, CDFA will come and do sampling of nearby trees, looking for any live population. So like I said earlier, any find on the trap is treated as a quarantine find and treatments are made. But before making the treatments, the regulators also confirm if there is any live population or not, because that's also another important thing to consider. All the host plants in the yard or neighboring yards within 400 meter are treated with a foliar and a systemic insecticide, not just foliar, both, or two foliar insecticide application, because again, we're targeting whatever population is already existing, and we're also targeting eggs that could be tucked in right within the feather flowers and not be exposed to pesticide when they hatch. And within a period of 2 weeks, we go back again and treat any surviving population. A professional applicator will come and treat the applicator backyard citrus trees and closely related plant with insecticides. And by closely related plant, Murea curry plant is one of those plants. What do they treat it with? The recommendations are Tempo, which is a foliar pyrethroid, and Merit, which is a systemic neonicotinoid. Why these strong chemistries? Because the goal is to eliminate the psyllids. CDFA also releases Tamarexia, especially in areas where ACP keeps showing up time to time, just to make sure that, if there is any populations that are not reached by foliar sprays, we have natural enemies going after them. But it's not very common in the valley area. It's mostly common in coastal region in Southern California. Some releases are made in Kern County, but I'm not aware of any other releases in other areas. Next step, next scenario, what to do for homeowners in Southern California coastal region where psyllid is well established but not near the ACP infected trees. There are quite a few things you can do because psyllid is present. The goal here is to, well, eradication if possible, but if eradication is not possible, manage the psyllid population so low that we're not helping, HLB spread. One of the ways that you could do that is by controlling ants, because ants are notorious for disrupting biocontrol. And in coastal region in Southern California, natural enemies are pretty active and help with insects like psyllid. Pesticide application is another approach. Another approach that you could take is you could cover your trees with a net that prevents ACP from getting there. But we'll talk more about that, but then that could the trees don't do very well under the bags. It's one way, but it's not, it's not very effective way. Kaolin clay or protectant is another. Spraying trees with kaolin clay is another way to manage psyllids. One of the other things you need to be constantly doing is examine your trees for HLB leaf symptoms. And if you see something suspicious, call CDFA hotline. Protect your trees from psyllid and be on the lookout for HLB. So I was talking about biocontrol and ants disrupting biocontrol. So let's talk a little bit about this effective parasitoid of ACP. Tamarexia radiata releases are an important component of Citrus IPM strategies for managing Asian Citrus Psyllid, especially in urban areas, where large-scale insecticide treatments are not very practical. And we have this not very practical, and not everybody is willing to do that, right? So what is this insect? The adult, as you can see in the photo here, is a parasitoid that likes to lay eggs under the ACP nymph. And as the egg hatch, it latches itself onto the larvae and feeds on it and develops inside, and it emerges leaving these holes, which is what you can see on the picture down here, parasitized ACP nymphs sowing exit holes. Um, it leaves, so one of the signs you could watch for to see if Tamarixia is present or not is to look for these mummies. Tamarixia is very small, and it's very hard to see them out in the field, but you could, when you check your twigs, if you see mummies like this, that signals to you that the Tamarixia is present and doing its job. Um, This particular parasitoid also kills ACP by host feeding. So not just parasitizing, it could stab and wound the ACP, and eventually it'll die. Parasitism in areas where Tamarixia has been released has been reported to be as high as 70%. But then again, we are dealing with a vector of a deadly disease. 70% efficacy is not enough. It helps, but it is not enough. To date, USDA and UC releases have been very successful in establishing the parasites and releasing. It continues since 2011, and to date, this number is pretty big. 34,394,813 Tamarixia has been released and are being continued to release. Efficacies and limitations. Tamarixia can find psyllids in areas where pesticides can't reach. But the limitation is it helps but does not eradicate the pest. And the challenges is ants. Because ants, come and take care of the colonies of hemipteran insects that produce honeydew, ACP being one of the most effective ones. The white bubbles you see over here is a honeydew packed in that waxy, bubble. It's like a drink for these ants. So it will come and it'll attack any Tamarixia or any other natural predator that will come to parasitize or um, feed on ACP. So it's important that we control these ants. And there are different types of ant species. There are different sugar feeding ants, which are mostly aggressive against biocontrol. For these, there are liquid baits like boric acid or gel baits like arsenic and boric acid that these ants will come and feed on. And you could use these on your backyard. For protein feeder ants, southern fire ant, there are um, things like corn cob grids, which have different insecticides. These are also very effective. One of the physical methods is using a stickum band on the trunk, which can get pretty messy. Um, but it's one of the options. Also, you could spray the trees with pyrethroids targeting ants on the trunk and everything, but then it's only going to kill the worker ants on the surface and it's not going to kill everything. So you might have to go and make application again and again. Liquid bits are probably the safest option. Insecticide treatments available to homeowners. There's quite a few, options that are available for professional treatment. Tempo and Merit, effectiveness against ACP high because Tempo is a pyrethroid, Merit is a neonicotinoid. It can help control psyllids for months, especially if new infestations are not coming from anywhere. If you do a good job, then it probably take care of it. Application timing, foliar when psyllids are present, and this is during the flush time. Systemic summer or fall to target any new populations that are emerging. As a homeowner, you can apply broad spectrum insecticides such as Savin, Malathion. Efficacy is moderate, duration of control a couple of weeks. Again, the eggs that are tucked between the feather flush are somewhat protected, and you might have to go and make second application. There are a couple other options as well. One of the sort of safer options that's not a broad spectrum pesticide is crop protectant known as Surround, um, which is kaolin clay. As you can see on the photo over here, the tree is whitewashed. Um, ACB doesn't like this kind of situation, but then as the tree grows new flush, the challenge is you have to go and keep applying it again because that new flush is not going to be covered with Surround. um, because this is where ACP would go and lay eggs. So this is one of the other option. I talked about this option prior, mist bags or screen houses to prevent psyllids from reaching trees. One of the very important consideration here is we're talking about the mist size small enough to keep the psyllids out. So mosquito nets don't work here. Some of the other bigger nets don't work here. There is a company out of Florida, if I am not wrong, the Tree Defender that produces these kind of bags.
Yeah.
So action steps for homeowners near the HLB infected areas, support CDFA who is coming to do the treatment. Here, really, you don't have much options. You have to replace the trees because you are within the quarantine areas, and if your tree is not already positive, it will probably likely be, infected soon. So, if you haven't already considered that, that's put it in the back of your mind. There is this. Outreach material put together by University of California, which talks about should I replace my citrus trees? I can share this with you since we don't have much time to talk about it today. But the answer is if you're within the quarantine zone, yes, you should replace your trees. If you're nearby, pay attention and make a plan. One of the other questions that I get is it okay to harvest the fruit if I'm within the quarantine areas? The HLB doesn't go to the fruit and psyllid doesn't feed on the fruit, so and immature psyllids don't live on the fruit. So as long as your fruit doesn't have leaves or things attached with it, that fruit is probably safe to gift or bring it to family and friends. Recent updates on ACP and findings from ongoing research. There's quite a lot happening. One of the things that researchers are focusing is early detection techniques because the earlier we're able to detect the disease, the earlier we can do something about it. There are, options like phloem sampling from the trunk for early detection, not waiting for the leaf, but just sampling from the trunk. Tests that measure defense proteins in leaves of sick trees to see if there is anything we can do to use that tool. Growing tolerant varieties. I want to talk about this a little bit. The first SLB tolerant variety rootstock, tolerant rootstock, carry CTEA, which is a CRISPR editor carrizo rootstock, has been registered and will be planted in Florida soon. Florida is preparing to, have a new orchard established using this rootstock. Other options that researchers are looking into is growing trees in higher densities with a shorter lifespan, applying bactericide to the trees, using bioengineering to create things that the tree itself is fighting against the insect and the disease. Okay. How safe are these tools? One of the messages that I want to communicate is the whatever research is being done, the microorganism or the human effects are have been studied extensively. These products, before they get registered, go through scrutiny, frequency and timing restrictions, both by federal and the state, that protect the consumers and any other effect whatsoever. Um, for example, things like bactericides, nobody is using them in California. In Florida, they're using it, but then these bactericides that target plants and the plant diseases don't actually affect the humans. That's one of the things I wanted to say here. And then there is multiple resources that you could look into. I'm sorry, I don't have enough time to go through all of this. But there is quite a bit of resources. If you are interested, you could reach out to me. You could reach out to master gardeners in your area, and they'll be able to direct you to, some of these resources. University of California also generates and maintains all this information. There is a ACP HLB website, and there is quite a few information on what to do in your backyard for There's information, a lot of information on growers, but then for master gardeners for residential citrus as well.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
This is all great. Thank you. Sorry, we don't have time for a Q&A, but we'll record all the questions that we have and we'll send them over to Sandipa and get an answer for them and post them at a later date on our webinar's webpage. But thank you so much for this wonderful presentation and thank you everyone for joining us today. We hope to see you again at next month's webinar.